So hello and welcome. I'm Jennifer Anderson, and I'm an artist here at the Carmel Art Association. I've been here since 2015. And welcome to my newest body of work called Nature's Gifts. I created this collection of work with the primary intent of exploring my themes of nature more in an oil painting. Many of you may know me as a printmaker, as a watercolorist, and now I've been delving into the depths of oil painting for the past couple of years. So this show was another kind of big push and exploration of oils in my favorite subjects. Each media I work with definitely tends to inform the outcome of the artwork, and not really the message that's conveyed, but kind of the feeling that's there. Oils, watercolors, and printmaking are all so very different, as you can see, and they're different to work with, and they have different results. You get kind of a different feeling, you get a different, not necessarily different composition, but there's different layering that happens, there's different colors that can be achieved. There's different, I guess, atmosphere that can be created with each medium. The process of underpaintings and layering with oils is very different from, I have just some watercolors up here, and many of you see my watercolors in the gallery. But the process of the underpainting and the layers of oils that happen is very different from how I layer in watercolor. And then that suite of pieces right there, that's all dry point printmaking. And those also have a completely different process, and there's multi-steps of a process to get to a dry point print. And they're all just very different. It's like you're relearning to do something every time you switch a medium. So I'm trying to stay fluent in all three because I love working in all three mediums. And so it's important to me to kind of keep those active. In dry point printmaking, I think, well, one of the underlying kind of continuums throughout everything is drawing and mark making. And it's really evident in the dry point prints because you can see the direct result of drawing. They look like drawings. It looks like I've drawn those lines, every single line, and I have. You don't see that so much in oil painting and watercolors because the brush marks take over and the layers take over.
What's the difference between mark making
and the dry points?
Dry.
Well, so with the dry point, it's what's called direct mark making. So I have a plate. I'll use this as an example. I should have brought one. So say this is my copper plate or my Flexoglass plate. I take a scribe and I scratch directly into it. So every mark you see there is directly drawn by me into a plate. It's called a matrix in printmaking. And ink is rubbed down into that and buffed off where there's no image. And then the paper goes on top and is pushed through the press, and the image is impressed onto the paper. Does that make sense?
How do you get the shading into the...
So it's a lot of work, but there's a lot of methods.
For sharp scribe, how do you
Yeah,
get
so
that?
there's etching. So for printmaking, there's a whole unique set of tools, and some of those tools are etching scribes. They are, you can use sandpaper, you can use, I use a lot of scratchboard tools that have scratchy effects, and that's how I gain tone and everything. And the harder you scratch, the harder you scrape those plates, the more dynamic the line is, and the more rich velvety blacks you'll get. And that's very characteristic of dry points. All those rich velvety blacks are something you can't really get in etching, because in etching, in printmaking, the material is removed, etched away from a corrosive process from a liquid etch solution, and it eats away the plate. Whereas in dry point printmaking, you're not using any solution to etch the material away. You're actually just pushing the material around. So if you were to scratch into a piece of metal, there's actually a little curl, or it's called a burr, that develops. It doesn't remove from the metal. It's right next to it. So it's like making a valley with a little hill next to it. And that, when you wipe the ink on, and you wipe the ink against that burr or against that curl, it catches ink and makes that really rich velvety line. So yeah, it's really.
Then you remove it.
Then you print it, and then if I want to print an edition, you add more ink and repeat the process.
So even though the ink is in indented in,
Yep.
it'll still
Well, you have,
transfer.
it will transfer, yes, so the etching press that I use, the rollers are like 400 pounds each, so it's going, there's 2 rollers that, and then a press bed that your plate goes down, and your press is, your print, and your plate and your paper is squeezed through those 2 400-pound rollers, and so the ink is transferred to the paper. But if you want to make another one, you have to do the whole process over again, of inking in everything, yeah. So it's laborious, it's beautiful, but it's laborious. But I love every step of printmaking. It really, there's something that excites me from drawing it to seeing the image come alive to then rubbing the ink on, sending it through the press, pulling the print. It's all a pretty amazing process. So
Can you correct?
can you correct
In
things?
other words, with oil
Right.
or watercolor, you can.
Well, so watercolor is probably one of the harder things to correct because once that pigment is on the paper, it's really hard to lift it off or correct it. Oil, you can paint over, so that is actually one of the easiest things to correct. In printmaking, I don't worry about correcting stuff too much. I just make it darker. If I feel like I make a mistake, that can be a darker area or whatever. So, but you can't scratch, you can burnish. If you're using metal plates, you can scrape down and burnish areas and it becomes the metal again. It never goes back to the original metal, but you can scrape down and burnish some areas. These dry points here were made with plexiglass plates, so you can't buff away any scratches. What you get, I mean, whatever scratches are there will ink up. And that's what's really nice about plexiglass is that it's incredibly sensitive to scratches. And so every little scratch that's there will show up in your print, which to me is nice. I like happy accidents. I like kind of the false bite or the false, the unintended mark making that can sometimes happen with just the handling of a plate, or if I use a plate that came from the hardware store that already has a scratch in it. It's okay with me because I kind of like that kind of random, thing that happens. So, good? Yeah. Yeah.
It's okay to ask questions?
Yeah, go ahead. I have a lot to say, but absolutely, I'm happy to take questions.
I don't want to slow your.
No, you're not.
Oh, so what's the advantages and disadvantages of using metal versus plexiglass? You told us
Yeah.
this is permanent, metal maybe not so much.
Well, metal not so much in that fact that you can scrape away. You'll still get a texture. I mean, anytime you scrape into metal, there's always going to be a texture that's created. Any texture in printmaking will get picked up by ink. So that will always appear, maybe not as drastic as it was before you scraped it. The advantage to plexiglass is the cost. And I tend to be much more, you can come on in. Yeah. I tend to be much more loose and fluid when I don't worry about the cost of materials. I think as most artists, we always have that good piece of paper that we don't want to use because we might ruin it. Well, that's how I am about copper plates. And copper plates they're gorgeous, they're beautiful, but I always feel like I tighten up and I'm not as loose as an expressive. So with plexiglass plates, it's readily available, it's relatively cheap, and if I mess up, it's okay because I can use it as a palette or it just goes to the recycling bin. It doesn't feel as like, oh, I just ruined a good piece of art material. So that's an advantage. The metal plates are more traditional, so there is that nice component of working with traditional materials, and plus copper is just such a beautiful medium to work on. So I think there's pros and cons to both, for sure, but I've turned to all plexi. I like being able to see what I can do, so with plexiglass, when you scratch on it, it becomes white, the scratches become white. So I put it over black, I put black paper underneath it, and I can perfectly see my drawing as it's developing. Whereas like if you're working in a metal plate, it's not quite so easy to see what's happening, because you're really looking at a lot of reflection, and the lines they don't darken up when you're working with them. Yeah.
Oh, so how does the average person that might want to learn how to do this? Can you take this class over at NPC?
You can. Yeah. There's a lot of printmaking classes at NPC, and I believe there's dry point printmaking. There are general printmaking introductory courses that you can take. Yep.
Oh, cool.
For sure. Yeah. So. Yeah. So back to kind of the whole theme of everything. So as you all know, obviously Mother Nature is my primary inspiration. And so being a constant observer of what nature has to offer is what drives me to create. The pieces in this collection are all images of birds and animals that I have had experience with, either seeing them in the wild or seeing them at a nature center. There's ample opportunity to view all the creatures that nature has to offer us. And here in Monterey, I think it's really amazing that nature has figured out how to live with us. I mean, we have deer walking up and down our suburban streets. We had a wild turkey visit our front steps every day this spring. We have scrub jays eat out of our hands. It is just amazing that nature has figured out how to be here with us, and it's there for us to observe and enjoy. I come from New England. Nature is much more elusive there. I don't know if it's because the type of species that are there, or just that there seems to be more ample room for them to have their own, like in the less populated areas. We have a place in Vermont, and it's not populated at all. So we don't see the creatures quite as often, but they do wander through. And regardless, seeing them all the time here or occasionally in New England, I find every experience to be incredibly beautiful and meaningful and valuable. So the show came together, all the pieces came together before I actually understood what my theme was. Like, I knew, of course, I'd be doing nature, but then I was thinking, well, why nature, and how am I going to title this show? And so as I was kind of thinking about that, I thought, well, yeah, why nature? And what is it about nature that I find so compelling? So I think it's the beauty of nature, the color that we have. Nature offers us a sense of wonder. It sparks a sense of curiosity. Nature is life. And I realized that really all of that is just like a big gift, or a big ongoing supply of gifts for us. So nature, I feel, is a gift to me, and it's gifted to me, and I'm gifted the beauty of the animals, the birds, and the flora, and it's a gift for me to create from all of that. So the idea that it's a gift to create, like having the gift of creating, is pretty amazing as an artist, and I know a few of you are artists here, and there's something really special about being able to do that and settling in and having that gift. In creating, when you create, the end result is either a drawing, a painting, a dry point print, and what happens is I'm putting my interpretation of a gift out into the world, which I hope people then view as a gift. And it's there for people to see, for people to enjoy, for people to make a connection to, and maybe even live with. So in pondering all of this, and being very analytical in what I do, because I want to be pretty deliberate in the things that I do, and I like to have a real concrete intention when I work and when I pull things together for a show, it caused me to also want to understand the concept of a gift. What does it mean to give a gift? So I think that we give gifts as a way of establishing or seeking connection. Gifts can be reflective of how the giver feels about somebody. And then when we're the giver, we're typically showing affection. We're showing appreciation, and we're establishing a connection. When we're the receiver of a gift, a different emotional response happens. We're flattered. We feel loved, and we feel connected. And I think the connection part is what's really important to me. I feel very connected when I feel connected to nature. I feel grounded when I'm making art. I get lost. The world goes away, and I can just focus in and just completely become lost in what I'm doing in the process, in scratching the plate, in painting with oils and painting with watercolors. That whole creative process I'm immersed in it, and the world just melts away. That's a gift. I want my audience to feel connected to my work. That's another reason I work so hard at making sure the eyes are very profound, poignant, and well done. I really want my audience to connect to my work. I want my audience to make their own connections with the work. I want you to see the painting of the fox or the kestrel, and to be able to connect to it your own nature story, or your own story, or some kind of emotional pull. That's your own personal connection to the piece. So, out of nature's vast entities of subject matter, why did I choose these animals and birds in particular? Well, each one actually has their own story for me. I'll talk about a few of them. So the egrets here, these are great white egrets. There's another one there, and then the sandhill crane. There's another water bird in back, an avocet. Oh, here's an avocet here. So I do a lot of repeated imagery just because I fall in love with the species, and I find, like, when I'm doing my research for photographs, I find so many that are just really compelling that I just need to do that. But the egrets, sandhill cranes, all the water birds, they're all water birds, and growing up in New England in the 1970s, the populations of water birds were declining in vast numbers due to the presence of DDT. And so seeing them as a child was magical. It was super exciting to like spot the great blue heron, or see the egret, or see any water birds that were being affected. Thanks to the efforts of EDF, the Environmental Defense Fund, DDT was banned. And slowly over time, water birds and ecosystems made a huge comeback. And so their populations, they repopulated, whole ecosystems changed and grew again. And it's all thanks to EDF banning DDT. So why is that important to me? Well, dear family friends were actually founding members of EDF. And I grew up with them as my second parents and uncles. And they were an integral part of my life. So that was something that was really ingrained early on, the importance of conservation, the importance of protecting our environment, the importance of connecting to nature so that we take care of it. Owls, I do a lot of owls. There's an owl there, there's an owl here, there's owls on my book cover. You've probably seen many watercolors of owls here. They carry a mystery and a silence and a power that is really unique. I know we can often hear them at night, but we don't always see them. And so it's pretty special when we do get to see them. Their calls are haunting, yet incredibly beautiful, and all unique. And I love being able to listen and try to identify which owls are calling. And now we have these amazing iPhones where you can call back to birds and they will answer you, which is pretty cool. So if you know what the species is, you can kind of play that and they call back. They're fierce predators, and yet they're incredibly gorgeous and look gentle, and their large eyes are so expressive. Their ability to fly in silence is absolutely amazing to me. When I was just post-college, I traveled in Europe, and I stayed at a youth hostel in Denmark that was it was a retired hunting ground. Hundreds of acres of preserved forest that were the past hunting grounds of past royalty in Denmark. And being my youthful self, I pushed it to the limit in terms of arriving back at the youth hostel one night, took the very last bus from town, from Copenhagen, over to the youth hostel, and I had a 2-mile walk in the dark from where we were dropped off at the gate to where the accommodations were. And I don't think I had a flashlight. I don't remember having a flashlight, but it was a thrilling experience, to say the least, walking through the woods. I didn't ever feel like I was in harm's way, but it was definitely invigorating. But one thing that happened that was just incredible was, at one point, an owl swooped out of the woods right in front of me and flew along the path right in front of me. And it was silent, but you heard the like soft whoosh of the wings. And to see it go off into the dark was just an amazing experience. The kestrel, which, let's see, this one's a kestrel here, there's a kestrel down at the end there. Yeah, there's two right next to Will. That is North America's smallest falcon, so it's actually larger than life size in these. It's the size of a jay in actuality. But that's a longtime favorite bird of mine. I don't see them very often, but we do see them in New England, and we do see them here on the West Coast. And they're a flash of burnt sienna, which is like no other. And burnt sienna is one of the colors of our artist palette. It's this tone right here. And Payne's gray, that's their blue, slate blue head, and the males sometimes have a slate blue wing. And they're just absolutely stunning. They're fierce and powerful. And it's the colors and the eyes, that mask on their face and their big, huge eyes. As falcons, their eyes are larger so that they can see prey farther away, are just beautiful. And every time I come across photographs of those species, I just draw them. They've been in every medium I do. So I have them in charcoal, I have them in watercolor, oil, printmaking, because I just return to them again and again. And then rabbits and hares, like who doesn't love a cute little rabbit? Right? They're big eyes and they have a component of shyness and playfulness. They're just beautiful little creatures, and I think I probably appreciate them a lot right now. I'm not trying to grow a vegetable garden, so I think if I were and they were attacking it, it'd be a different story. But for now, I fully appreciate when they hop out of the path as we're walking along Rivera Beach, and the marsh rabbits are over there, and they hop out and play. And I recently was up in the mountains and saw my first jackrabbit ever, which was, I think I squealed and nobody didn't know what was going on. And I just thought it was just amazing. They really do run fast at that kind of canter. It was pretty amazing. So I could go on, and I'm happy to talk more about all these guys, but I want to kind of circle back and talk about the gifts of nature again, and the fact that I've named this title, the name of the show, Nature's Gifts. So nature's gifts are abundant, and I don't think they should be overlooked. As givers, sometimes we may not fully understand the power or the impact of a gift. My mother recently passed away, and my mother fostered in me my love of nature, and that was a gift. And I didn't know that would be a gift that would be a lifelong, a lifelong impact. And I think that as I grew up and always drew and painted birds that she so loved, I didn't know the impact it was having on her. So fostering in me and really nurturing a love of nature, was a huge gift in my life. And through that love of nature, I found and explored my artistic voice. That was another gift. And then, so I was recently at my mom's house this spring, and I was overwhelmed by the fact that every room in her house has pieces of my art framed. Every single room. I was overwhelmed. She ran a bed and breakfast for years in Virginia, and I didn't have an opportunity to visit that particular house. So when I did this time, it took me aback, and I was just stunned and overwhelmed with, I had no idea the impact it had on her, but I don't know, but then I saw that, wow, she actually knew the impact that she had on me. So the gift and the giver kind of going back and forth there. So I made her handmade cards, I made her little books, I made her all the way from childhood all the way up. And it was really, really interesting to see everything. So she had my cards, birthday cards, Christmas cards kind of everywhere, as well as framed artwork in every room. And it was really, really special. Many of the pieces I had forgotten about, but being there and seeing it all made me realize those connections that are made when we are giving and receiving gifts. So I implore you to enjoy nature, to view it as a gift, to maybe take with it a little bit of a different feeling when you're out there. And when you're viewing art, understand or maybe be open to the fact that the artist is giving you something to connect to communicate, like to create your own story with, to have a strong connection to, an emotional pull, just anything that kind of makes that connection. And that's what I feel like the whole gift giving, the whole idea of concept of a gift is about. So when I titled this show, I titled the show before my mother became critically ill. So I really, the whole experience I've had in the past 8 weeks has been pretty amazing, having all that happen and understanding, I chose Nature's Gifts as the title, and really it is what I do and what I speak about and why I do my artwork. And then isn't it interesting how it all kind of came full circle? So it's been really, really special for me to be able to work as an artist and work in this path, in this field, and have so many people respond to my work so strongly, and to see a full house here today. Thank you so much for coming. And I would love to take questions now, if you have any more. Yes?
I actually have 2 questions.
Okay.
It sounds like you work from photographs.
I do.
how big do you blow up the photographs you work from then?
My photographs were tiny, to be honest
Really?
with you. Yeah, because I work pretty much from my iPad. I don't print them out anymore. And when I was printing them out, it was just 8.5 by 11
So you just
paper.
work from a little image?
I do, yeah. But what I do, so I brought, many of you maybe have my book, which is a book of a bunch of pages from all my sketchbooks and journals. So one thing that I do as well is I work extensively in sketchbooks and journals. And I do a lot of preliminary drawings and working out of imagery.
That's your sketchbook.
This is a sketchbook. And you guys are welcome to look through these, yeah. And so like here's a scrub jay, see here's an owl, here's an owl. So I work a lot with, my imagery I work with over and over and over. I never get tired or bored of it. I work with it over and over again. And so by the time I'm going to a larger piece, I'm so familiar with it that there's a little bit of muscle memory that's happened. And there's also just the familiarity with the species, so that I have a lot more confidence, I guess, when I go large.
Okay, and the other
Yeah.
question is like, say this painting here, how long does that take?
God, that's always a hard question to answer.
Well, 'cause they're all different probably.
They're all different, and also it depends on how quickly the magic happens in
Okay.
art, right? Because sometimes you don't get the colors quite right. The drawing for that came a lot more quickly than, say, the drawing for the kestrel that's in flight 2 paintings down. That kestrel in flight took me probably 4 hours just to get the drawing correct on the canvas, even though I had already drawn and painted it on paper. This one here, for some reason, when I was able to stand with a large canvas, and the larger the surface area I have to draw, the more quickly the proportions fit or work. They come together more quickly. The smaller the space, I struggle more with making those proportions correct. But the painting part, of course, took longer for this one because of just the size itself took a lot longer. And it also was something that I did and left it alone for a while, then came back to it. And working out the background. So I obviously don't put my creatures in their natural environments. My backgrounds are mostly texture and color fields. And figuring that part out is actually a lot harder than it looks. Because you have to figure out the right value, the right hue, and how much texture, how much texture to have, how much texture not to have, so it doesn't detract away from the image itself. So I think I don't have a number of hours for what it took. But then I also ignored the eye on that one for a long time, because sandhill crane eyes are actually not very beautiful. And so I really almost didn't want to put it in, but I thought it would be really weird to have it be the only one here without an eye, more abstracted. So I really had to work on that eye and make sure I kind of got it to be, they're actually have very ugly eyes. They look like dinosaur eyes. I don't know how to describe it. They're not very beautiful eyes.
Unless you're a dinosaur.
Unless you're a dinosaur and yes, then you'll love the dinosaur eyes, yeah.
Oh, you did a great job.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, I was just looking at it before you talked about it.
Thanks,
It's
thanks.
amazing.
Yeah, sandhill cranes are pretty amazing. We lived in Florida for a stint, and you hear them before they arrive. You can hear they're incredibly loud as they're traveling in from, I don't know, half a mile away. I don't know what the sound distance is, but they're very loud, and you know they're coming in. And we'd have, I don't know if we were in a zone where, I guess a breeding area, because we would have sandhill cranes and their babies aloft in our yard, which was pretty cool. Yeah, so, yeah.
Did you start with the ground color first?
I did not. Well, yeah, so I definitely start with an underpainting for all of my canvases are toned first.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I do some texture on them as well. But I start off with charcoal. So all the oil paintings, there was a charcoal line drawing, and I think I use charcoal because it's I feel expressive in it, and I'm always afraid of getting too tight and illustrative in my work, even though they are they're not technical illustrations, they're not scientific illustrations, but charcoal, I guess just because of the medium itself, I know I'm trained to be loose with it, and so I work with charcoal to get the drawings down first, absolutely.
Yeah.
What kind of colors do you use when you're doing the layers, like the beginning layers?
Okay, so a lot of my beginning, I love the color burnt sienna, like I was talking about for the kestrel. So I tend to do that, and you can see it peeking through on some, like the undertones there for the fox, and even for this guy. But a lot of times it's just a mixture of whatever is available.
Mhm.
So it can look pretty muddy as well.
So is it like, do you use try to use different colors to make certain colors pop out more?
Ah.
Or?
I'm not that good at color theory anymore to know how to do
Oh,
that.
okay.
Those would have been my college days when I was like immersed in color theory courses. I'm trying to relearn that part of color theory. In fact, I just got a book to I want to do a study on that and understand it a little bit more. Because underlying colors absolutely affect what you're putting on top of them, and vice versa. So I've been winging it, to be honest with you, in terms of, I like burnt sienna, and I like that as an undertone, and then sometimes it pops through, sometimes it doesn't. I do know that the cooler colors I don't like as much as underpaintings, so I try to stay away from those.
What book were you mentioning
I
earlier?
will have to look for it.
Okay.
I found it.
All right.
It was another artist that I saw on Instagram said, oh, I just did 6 months of studying this book and it changed my world in color, and I was like, oh, cool. So I got it, and if you give me your name, I'll send you the one
Yeah,
it is.
that'd be
Because
awesome.
it's pretty cool, yeah. Someone else had it, Anne.
When you do the charcoal drawings, do you have to treat them before you put the oil on top again, or?
So they're basically just outline charcoal drawings. I'm not doing a rendering in charcoal.
But even an outline would smear.
It does smear, which is okay with me. Like actually you can see it here. I don't know if you can see when you get close to this. I left the essence of it here because I kind of like that evidence of the drawing. And so somehow it stays. It's pretty dark, and then if I use anything with liquid over it, it sets it pretty quickly.
Oh, so do you put liquid over all these?
No,
or
I don't. But I use liquid like when I'm
just
doing
in the paint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not for the whole painting,
Right.
but at different times throughout the painting. Liquid is a medium, for those of you who don't know that.
Yeah.
It makes your oil paint a little bit more fluid. And it also helps it dry a little bit more quickly. So I use it, especially when I'm working with the eyes. Like the eyes, they're so important to get right. So if you don't get an eye right, you're just doomed, or the painting is doomed. So, so the liquid.
Is there any varnish on these?
I don't do any varnishing. No, I've never varnished.
Yeah.
I know people do, but I think I'm afraid to.
I don't, I like them without.
Yeah, I like it without. I mean, I should try one and see what it looks like, varnish. So varnish is what you do after the painting is completely done. And some people think that it enhances the painting and brings out or gives it more depth, but I've never used it, so I can't speak to that.
I've heard it really protects your painting.
It probably can, but there's so
Yeah.
much, I think oil paintings are pretty, I don't say they're indestructible, but I don't think that they're gonna get much damage without a varnish
I
either.
heard about this one artist, and he had painted it with a varnish, and then somehow it was exposed to a lot of mold. Mold was all over it, and all he had to do was remove the varnish, and his painting was fine, and then just
Yeah.
re-varnish it
Whoa.
again.
Right, so I know that with conservation, with art conservation, that's true as well. And I don't know if historic paintings are covered, I don't know the whole history of that, but I'm assuming, because there's a lot that can be done with
It's
conservation
like
of
a
paintings.
piece of glass over
Yeah.
it, they described it like that.
Right,
in
right,
this
yeah.
documentary I was watching.
Oh, interesting.
Well,
Very cool.
in a few hundred years, your work's gonna be historic.
We hope, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, at what point do you do the eye?
It depends. If I'm afraid of the eye, I'll wait till the very end or towards the end. But then sometimes looking and working with a piece that has a big, just vacant hole for the eye is disturbing. So I'll work on it and get it going right away. And then I also know if I work on it right away, I'll know whether or not the painting is going to be a keeper or not. Because if I ruin the eye, then I stop working on the painting. Because, I mean, I guess with oil painting, you can go back into it. Dry point, you can't really scratch away or erase a mistake, so I have to get it right. So I usually work on the eyes first for dry points. And watercolors, I think, I don't know, it's probably a little bit of both right away and then waiting a little bit. It depends on how, also, a lot of the eyes are different. Some eyes are more complex than others with their reflections and with their irises. And so I have to really make sure I'm ready, like be in the right frame of mind to do the eye when I'm doing it.
You mentioned the eye of the Falcon,
Uh-huh.
which sort of intimated that the Falcons have eyes that are different from other bird species. So how are they different, say, from a hawk?
Well, probably not very different from a hawk, but I think for me, you're right. For me, I think it's the size of the eye in their face and the expression. They have that extra, the yellow that kind of goes. I don't know what it's called, but it's around the eye, and I think it's just the shape of that. To me, it just evokes a lot of expression, and that's what intrigues me a lot. Falcons and all the birds of prey have bigger eyes than, say, like our little bluebird, right? Who has just a tiny little eye. Because all the birds of prey have to see pretty far to be able to hunt.
And I have another question.
Yeah,
What is relief painting?
relief painting. Is
Yeah.
it relief printmaking?
Really printing.
Okay, got it. That's okay. Those are woodcuts. Woodcuts and linoleum prints. So, yeah, and I don't have any of those in this show. I don't know if there's any here at the gallery right now. But a woodcut is another type of printmaking where you have a piece of wood and you're carving away your non-image area, or you're creating your image by doing two layers, the top layer and the carved away layer. And ink, in that case, ink is rolled on top and sits on top, and then paper pushed onto it, and the print is transferred.
So you describe the chin, whatever,
The Chincolet?
how you do that?
Yeah, of course. So those are dry point prints, which I said have a plate all scratched in, inked up, paper on top goes through the press. However, I add the additional process of Chincolet, which is the buff tone. So you'll see that you have the white here, and then the image, and this buff tone is actually, that buff tone color is there because it's another piece of paper. And that is a very fine piece of Japanese paper called, I use Gampi, I use the Awagami papers, Gampi, Kirikata are some of my favorites. They're all different, wispy thin papers. And you cut them to the size, you can cut them to anything. I cut them tear them to the size of my plate. So I have my plate, then I put my Chincolet paper on top, and that is coated with a rice paste. And then the printmaking paper, which is the white, goes on top of that. So it prints like a sandwich, think of it that way. And so it glues and prints at the same time, and that process is called Chincolet.
That's the white part underneath?
So the white is the heavyweight printmaking paper. The buff tone, the tan tone,
Yeah.
this color here,
Uh-huh.
is the thin Japanese paper
Oh.
that is printed on and glued to the backing paper at the same time.
Gotcha.
So Chincolet, Shin is from the Chinese paper, word Chinese paper, and Colet means collage. And true Chincolet happens when you print and glue at the same time. You can collage on papers afterwards to a printmaking piece, but that's not Chincolet, that's collaging. Chincolet is when you do it with the printmaking process, with the printing process.
Is it all one block?
Yeah.
Or do you use multiple blocks?
One, these are all just one color with black ink. Yep. Yeah, I don't particularly like color inks very much. They get flat, and it's really hard to know how to layer them. So I just kind of stuck. And I love the strong expressiveness of black printmaking ink and the power that has. So that's what I'm really drawn to. So that's why I just kind of stick with. Yeah.
It's really amazing the expression on this
On that guy?
owl's face.
And he was a fun one. I did him as a watercolor as well. He's actually in a sketchbook too. I don't know if I could find it. I don't know where he is. But it's a fun. Hang on a second. Here? Oh, I don't know where he is. Anyway, I did him in a sketchbook as well. And it was a great photo. Oh, there he is.
Oh.
So, yeah, but I think he came out a little bit more, with more attitude in the drawing.
He looks
Yeah.
French.
Yeah, he looks French.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes I find it hard to, like, time will go by and it's like, why aren't I painting? Why aren't I doing artwork? There's so many things that get in the way of my artwork, and I think, okay, I'll have time later on today, and then I don't, or
Mhm.
it's like, I have to stay up till 2 in the morning to try and do some art,
Yeah, well, I think,
Like, how do you
How
produce
do
so
I-
much?
well, very, I guess very committed, like setting art practice is an important part of art making, like how you practice your art. And by that, I mean the practice of sitting down and making it happen on a continual basis. And so sketchbooks actually help that concept a lot with me, because there's a freedom in sketchbooks that I don't have on canvas, because I don't feel like I can mess up in a sketchbook. It can be intimidating going to a big blank canvas or to a big blank piece of good watercolor paper. That can be super intimidating and tend to kind of hold back. But working in sketchbooks is a great way to kind of achieve, conquering that fear of starting. Or not even, it's not even a fear of starting, or conquering whatever roadblock it is that you have for starting. Working in sketchbooks can take it away, because you can just shut the sketchbook and never look at it again if you don't like it. Or you just turn the page. Tear the page out. I mean, it doesn't really matter. And it sets up the practice of making art. And then it becomes a need. For me, it's really hard for me not to make art now, because it has become such an ingrained daily practice for me. And in fact, I was just saying to my family this morning, this past 8 weeks is the least productive I've ever been in my entire life. Going back and forth to Virginia, not having my artwork as a part of my day, if not daily, every other day kind of routine of what I was doing. And I'm looking forward to kind of picking that up again and getting reestablished. But there is, like anything, it's like with exercise, right? It's hard to get motivated. You know you should do it, but the motivation is sometimes hard. So I think baby steps, and once those baby steps become a regular routine, it's almost like a need. Like, oh, okay, now's the time. Or also, I think you can, I tutor math as well. And when I try to get my students to do their homework assignments and stuff, I said, try to think about doing math at the same time every day. So your brain needs it. Your brain you can train your brain to need something, I think, right? A habit, right? A force of habit. And so if you do it at the same time every day, your mind and your body and your soul is gonna expect to do math at that time. And you might enjoy it more, and you might do better, etc. So maybe art can be viewed as the same way. Setting up a space at your house that's dedicated for it.
Yeah, I have all.
You have it all.
3 different
So you
spaces.
just gotta.
I put a special drawing table in the living room. I can draw while watching TV.
I'm just aspiring, but I feel like I can only do it if I'm completely my mind's clutter free.
Yeah.
If I just have the list of all it's I have to be in a certain zone
Yes, you do,
to
for
be
sure.
able to do it.
So walk away, make the zone happen. Leave the dishes. I've gotten really good at turning away from the dirty house and walking into the studio. But sometimes I need to do those dishes, because that can also be therapeutic and can clear my head. And just have a clean countertop is really nice. For some reason, if it's the only thing that's clean in the house, I can okay, now I can do art. But yeah, walking away from the life, turning off the phone. You might use your phone as music or entertainment when you're making art, which is great, but not to reading email, not to looking at whatever, getting down those rabbit holes of cat videos or whatever, right? Clearing all that away is really good. Turning it off. But once you start doing it, it's easier to do. It's just like anything. Once you start, oh no, I don't have to. The laundry's going to be there. The dishes are going to be there. The dust bunnies are going to be there.
Yeah, you'll never
But
catch
time
up.
to make
It
art,
seems
right?
Right.
The time to make art is precious and valuable. Yeah, for sure.
In your bio, it says the imagery has been influenced by your experience as a mother.
Oh,
So
yes.
Is that with the clean countertop?
Yeah, sort
Or
of.
is there something deeper?
A little bit deeper, I hope. No, yeah, definitely a little deeper. So a lot of my work I raised 3 children. They're all, they are 28, 26, and 24 now. And I homeschooled them. We lived in Vermont for a long time, most of their childhood, and then we moved here. And they were immersed in my life, I was immersed in their life, and so art making and homemaking and mothering and was all kind of interwoven. And so a lot of the themes that I worked with when, before my kids all kind of went off to college was, and even after they went off to college, was really strongly grounded in family connections, family understanding, family relationships, mothering. And so a lot of the imagery, like I at the time I was doing a lot of crows and ravens, mostly because when printmaking, those blacks, those rich blacks were just so, it worked so wonderfully when you're working with crows and ravens as imagery. And then I started learning more about crows and ravens and how they're very community-centric, they're very family-centric, and they're committed to lifelong relationships, and siblings stay on after a year or two and help raise the next brood. It was very interesting to me, so that became very symbolic. And so that's where a lot of the imagery, of my imagery, my past imagery, was related to mothering. And I think now, I mean, I could say it still does now just because of the connection to nature and the connection to species that rear their young and take care of their young, they mate for life, that's all a part of it as well. So,
Do you have any ravens or crows in your sketchbook you could show?
Oh, yeah, oh, for sure. We can pass these around if you guys wanna look, but there's two. Oops. Where are they? So there's a couple there. And I was just gonna show you, there's the kestrel again.
So those are mostly watercolor, right?
These are all, see, there's the kestrel. Yeah. Yeah, these are, mostly watercolor. Here, I'll just start passing these around. You guys can look at them at your will.
I want your sketchbooks to look like my final pieces.
Aha. You want to, there you go, just pass them along. And there's also, I mean, so that's what this book, I published this book 2 years ago. And it's from all pages of years of sketchbook pages.
Oh, look at that, Mother of the Universe.
Hi, yeah. I'm sorry, can you say that again? Yeah, it's all pages. Yeah. So the question was, do I use watercolor for all my sketchbooks, or do I use anything else? And I do use watercolor, and I actually, the sketchbooks are watercolor sketchbooks, so they're heavy-duty paper, so that they will take a lot of water media. I use watercolor crayons, I use watercolors, I use micron pens, I use graphite. I love water-soluble graphite, which you draw with a pencil and you can use watercolor brush on top of it, and it makes a real beautiful watercolor graphite. So they're watercolor pencils. They're water-soluble graphite pencils. I love them. They're really, they're really fun.
That's not watercolor right there, is it?
Well, that's pen and ink with watercolor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard that book? I just finished reading. It's a watercolor book called Making Colors Sing.
I have not heard that one.
It's
That sounds
really
nice.
good. So good.
Sounds really nice.
Is there watercolor in this show?
Just here up front, there's a bunch of watercolors up here. And then in the watercolor room in the gallery, there's a few more watercolors that are framed. Yeah?
Is David Hornig, is that the color guy that you,
I don't know. I'll have to look at the book.
okay, he's got a terrific book about
Does he?
color, yeah. There's
That's good.
many editions.
This one has exercises in it,
Yeah, I think
and
his does.
even video links that you can watch
Oh, okay.
online for color mixing, which is really nice. Yeah. I think we get attached to certain colors and we use them all the time, but I found that sometimes I want to do something different and I don't really know where to start.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like you can never stop learning when it comes to
Yeah, no
color and mixing color and applying it and knowing how to use it with what you want to do.
Dramatic.
Aw.
So what weight is the paper?
I don't know. So this is the Strapper. I know the bigger ones are like, they're probably the 140 pound. But I don't know what that one is. We'd have to look it up.
Do you ever draw ptarmigans?
I have not drawn a ptarmigan. If someone told there was a stamp competition for ptarmigans,
Oh, really?
and I was gonna do, U.S. stamp, and someone said, you should do this, and then I just never did, but they're beautiful. Yeah, they are quite beautiful, and they have different plumage, for different seasons, so, yeah, they're a striking bird.
So what's your favorite medium?
My favorite medium? I think whatever I've chosen to work with at the moment, right? Watercolors tend to come really easily for me. So that's a go-to when I need to get grounded and get settled and I haven't made art for a while or whatever the roadblock has been. I'll sit down with watercolors because I know it'll kind of just get me going. Oils can be incredibly frustrating because they're so different from watercolors. Right. And you really kind of have to wait for them to dry before you can get some of the detail that you want. So I'm learning to love that part of it. And then printmaking, I love every step of printmaking. And printmaking has so many different mediums that you can work in, like etching, dry point, woodcut, lithography, and they all present really unique experiences, so I kind of love all parts of that.
I know. It's almost like you could reach out and touch them and feel the softness of it.
Did you ever paint things like dogs and cats?
Yeah, they pass.
Occasionally, but not no. I mean, I've had a couple of people ask me, like for commissions. I end up hate doing them because it's so hard to capture someone's head the way that they see their head. It's almost impossible. So it's not an enjoyable process at all.
I have dogs, and I'm gonna show you pictures of them.
Okay.
Because you said you love that color.
Oh, is he that color?
I'm going kind of slow.
Yeah.
Oh,
how nice.
Yeah, he's got a 70-pound Aussie border collie. I'll show you.
Oh, wow.
The violence, I know. Just
They're amazing.
This one
Well, thank
kind of
you.
has a furrowed brow.
Those could be like, just published.
Well, that's what I did the book for. Yeah. So.
You want more?
Yeah, I spent a month
Were you able to see?
at an Audubon
Yes. Okay.
sanctuary off the coast of Maine back in 2018. I was an artist in residence at this, it was called Hog Island Audubon. And I was keeping sketchbooks at the time, but one of the attendees, so I was there as an artist in residence. Everyone else that was there throughout the month were there as birders and bird watchers, and they were there to experience a week of an immersive bird watching experience with experts from all over the country, experts in biology and ornithology. And one of the guests came to the cabin that I was staying in, and she was looking through my sketchbooks, and she said, "You should publish these." And that was the first time. That was the seed of publishing this book. And she said the same thing. She said, "You should just publish them as is." So what I did is I did a selection from all my books and published that book there. So.
And then you added some of your observations and nature.
Yeah, because my sketchbooks are full of those little notes as well.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. So.
Holy schmoly.
Well, thank you everybody for coming. It was a very nice surprise to have a full house. And I appreciate you spending part of your Saturday with me. And I'll just stay here. If you have any other questions, mill around. And feel free to ask me about any particular pieces or pieces in the watercolor room or anything else.
So Will's going to give you a grade, but he's grading the audience also.
Ah, yes, I see.